I have been having this conversation with New Thought congregations for, about 10 years. And I think of it as a conversation because, I'm not a minister. Technically, I have no credentials, other than I am a New Thoughter going back to the early 80s. Actually, the person who introduced me to New Thought is sitting here, my best girlfriend. She actually introduced me to New Thought, to a Unity Church in Salt Lake, of all places. Who knew? So what I've been trying to do, it's part of my mission, is to help anyone who'll listen, that kind of thing, to find their way back to a sense of wonder and connection to nature. And to me, nature and God are the same thing. I don't really need further evidence of God's presence but to look about and to look at you, because we are all nature also. And then to help you with that reconnection and to then feel inspired to live in community with nature. And that's the name of this talk, and that's what I really believe we need to do. So you can think of this as your pre-Earth Day talk, lesson, but this is an everyday thing, this is not a once-a-year thing. And by the way, anything I say today, I mention any of the references, if you give us your email back at the Soul Pajamas table, we'll email you all the links so you don't have to take notes if you're a note taker. So our relationship to nature must be personal, very personal. It can't be theoretical. It can't be something, out there, that nature backdrop, the app on our phone. No. So, because there's a lot of things going on all the time, and they're often far away, so we don't feel that connected to them. The hurricane in the Philippines, far away. Flooding in England like they haven't had in a long time. The polluted river in West Virginia. These are things that are happening around us, but often they're sort of, and sometimes we do this to protect ourselves. Oh, scary, so we protect ourselves. But our relationship to nature must be very, very, very personal. And so, when I talk about this, I think there's 3 levels that we need to work on. And the first one is, the first level is for you to remember your connection to nature, which is the original connection, and take whatever action you're inspired to do from that. For many of us, that original aha came from being out of doors, and that's where we recognized our oneness or our connection to everyone. And in case, I just want to get your memory wheels churning here for a guided meditation at the end of the talk. So I'm going to use my childhood experience of when that happened, and so to get your wheels turning. So I was a little girl, maybe 9 or 10. We used to go to Maine in the summers, way up north. It's called Christmas Cove. Fun name, huh? And it was gorgeous, If you've ever been to Maine, it's just breathtaking. The air is so clean. And there was a little forest next to the house we rented where we played. And one day we were playing, and the sun was shooting in through the pine trees, gorgeous pine trees. Whole bed of the floor of the forest was full of pine needles. And I don't know what happened. I sat down, or I don't know what caused me to be seated, but all of a sudden I looked over, and there was this beautiful little patch of moss. I'd never looked at moss before. I was, 9 or 10. How many mosses had I been around? Not that many. The sun came through and shone on that moss, and the little tendrils of moss, if you've ever seen them, are like, reaching up to the sky. And I had this, I get it. Now, at 9, you're not sure what it is you're getting, but I got something, and the wind kind of blew through me, and I had a sense of being connected to everything at that moment. I bet you had one of those experiences too. And that's really important to bring that back and make it vivid and make it a feeling thing, not just a head thing. So if you've never had this kind of moment, and I'm sure you have, but if you haven't, please before you leave the planet, create this kind of moment. And above all, take your children and your grandchildren with you. Because, you've heard about, let me put it this way. How can we expect them to be stewards of our planet in the future if they have no connection to her, to Mother Nature? If it's an app or a background to a video game, kids, don't be offended. I'm sorry, you may all love nature here, big and little kids. But it's very important, and you've heard about nature deprivation, right, in children? And it's a rising problem, and it's a psychological condition caused from not being in nature. And the most at risk, the research shows, are suburban kids, because to them life is a big, asphalt cul-de-sac, and where is nature? It's a tree here or there, Anyway, it's very important to get them involved. But I'd like to do, and I want to re-emphasize again this idea of making it personal, as if nature were a member of your family. So I've asked John Robbins to help me with this exercise. John's just going to stand. I want you all to look at John. You know John, but for a moment, I want you to forget that he's the John Robbins you know, and think of him as nature. I knew that'd get a laugh. Anyway, I told him he could do anything he wanted just so he didn't speak. Anyway, so John is nature. He is a member of your family, Uncle John. He lives with you every day. He was there when you were born, and he'll be there when you die, when you go to another place. He is with you all day, everywhere you are, in your house, outside in your yard. And the thing about him is he doesn't talk to you. He doesn't tell you what to do. He doesn't judge you. He allows everything. And, you don't get in trouble for anything you do to him. But think about that. John, Uncle John, he's in your family. Would you pour chemicals all over him? Well, maybe on a bad day. No, would you pour chemicals all over him? Would you bury him in garbage or toxic waste? Would you saw off an arm or chop off a leg because it was useful, profitable, productive? Would you do that if John were nature and lived with you every day? Thank you, John. I know, you'll never see him the same way again, right? Just keep that, maybe it's Big Mama you picture and not John, but just think of it. Every day, nature is a member of your family. All right, so the second level, then, after you've reconnected and found a way to make this personal, is to begin to incorporate actions into your daily life that feed this connection. So you can begin to think of activism not as like, placard-carrying activism, but almost like a mantra, an internal prayer that you are giving to yourself over and over again. These little actions can be very meaningful. And so if you think you're not an environmental activist, just in case you think you're not, you really are. And I'm going to read you something that will convince you. Anyway, has anyone ever heard of Julia Butterfly Hill? Since you haven't, she was 23 years old in 1997, and she climbed into a 1,000-year-old redwood tree, one of the oldest living things on the planet, 30 stories high, and they named the tree Luna, and she stayed there for 2 years. She didn't go up and down. She stayed there for 2 years to prevent the Pacific Lumber Company from cutting down the oldest stand of trees on the northern coast. And they harassed her, they flew airplanes over her, they tried to cut off her food source. She stayed there for 2 years. And they won. They protected a, pathetically small, in my mind, amount of land, but they did it. And she's gone on to be a wonderful teacher and advocate for the environment, and she has a book, in case you're interested, called The Butterfly Effect, and the story of Luna. Anyway, here's what she says about environmental activism. 7 billion of us, and counting, are all activists because we're actively shaping our world. The only question is, are we conscious activists or unconscious activists? We see the results of unconscious activism all around us. Virtually every problem is caused by unconscious choices being made over and over and over again. To compound the problem, certain people want the rest of us to be unconscious, so there's even more to work for. It is impossible not to make a difference. Every choice we make leads either toward health or toward disease. There's no other direction. The question is not, how can I, one person, make a difference? The question is, what kind of difference do I want to make? So once you begin to shift your consciousness in this way, the actions you take reinforce and expand this idea that nature is part of you as part of your family. So every act of recycling, gardening, filling the bird feeder is programming your consciousness so that you begin to see your oneness and connection to everything. And I can tell you that we've done this ourselves for the past 15 years, and it really starts to happen. All of a sudden, it's like a default way of thinking. You're conscious of your relationship to the earth. And there are so many fun things you can do, and I thought I'd just list a few for you. It's a great thing for a church community to do. And of course, at the top of the list is Unity Earth Care. Unity has a wonderful environmental initiative, and it's been around for a few years. I don't remember how many, but and there's some really, first of all, you have to kind of absorb the covenant of it, the principle, the beliefs, and then there's all kinds of fun things a community can do. I mean, out here, you could build a butterfly garden, you could grow vegetables, you could, volunteers could collect batteries and take them to My Organic Market, all kinds of fun things you can do as a community. And again, it's not just the act, it's the signaling to your consciousness, and particularly with kids. That's one thing, very valuable. And there's the Unity Fairfax has really jumped into this with, legs and feet. So they're a good model. You could join a CSA, a Community Support Agriculture Group, and volunteer at the farm. Get your hands in the dirt with the kids. It's a wonderful thing. You could make art projects out of recycled junk with your kids. It's a great way to say, ooh, what was this? Oh, and look what it can be, Actually, I wish the kids would all take that up as a profession. We would be in much better shape. And you could join a watershed group. There's one here called the Muddy Branch Alliance. Really looks like a fun group of people. You should go to their website. And you can do stream walks together and help remove invasive plants and monitor water quality. It's an incredibly beautiful experience. And meanwhile, you're out with the birds and the bees. It's just, there's so many things, and all of these are pleasurable. And these actions, they don't represent sacrifice. You see what I mean? A lot of people think, environmental, do the right thing. I have to give something up. It can be joyful if you embrace it in this way, So it's that shift in your source of pleasure. I have to read you this excerpt from Barbara Kingsolver, an interview in the Sun magazine, and she really nails this idea. As a household, we try to examine our wants. We don't replace functional things simply because they're old. I live in an old house, work on a computer that some would call ancient, and still have a favorite sweater I purchased in high school. My daughters like to wear handmade and vintage clothes, and all of us sew, knit, cook, and make gifts rather than buy them. Simplicity offers rewards. Instead of driving to a gym, I hoe a garden and haul hay into the barn. And I find that I love using my muscles, not to mention the companionship of my sheep. She gives lots more examples like this, but here's what I like. This isn't about paper or plastic or some vision of self-congratulatory parsimony. It's about replacing material gratifications with spiritual ones. I don't know how much carbon I'm offsetting with my choices. I just prefer to be a good animal rather than one that fouls its nest. Go, Barbara. You should read her new book, too. It's beautiful. So speaking from our personal family, the Johnson Soul Pajamas experience, we've been shifting our way of living for 15 years now, and so what's happened is that same thing she talks about. Our decision-making has changed. So it's not just, do we need it at all, but, and then what does it cost, and is it convenient, and all of that. Then there's that fourth question. What kind of harm will it do? What's the imprint of that thing we're going to buy? So I'm going to give you a good example that everyone in the room can relate to, ice melt. Right? Everybody had to get some ice melt this year, unless you were fortunate enough to live in a condo or an apartment or something. Anyway, ice melt is a very toxic product. It ruins the watersheds and flows into the streams and the storm drains. But there's different kinds of ice melt. Well, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have thought about it. But now we go through this exercise of, okay, which is the least harmful snow melt? And, they make it at PetSmart or something. But the point is that just as one little thing, every day, something crops up like that. And once you get into the habit, it becomes, it's the default where you go when you're thinking about what to buy things. So there are, there's a lot of examples. So now, level 3. So this reconnection to nature and the shift in consciousness, fed by small actions, lead you to the third level. And that is entering the world of spiritual activism. Actually, probably many of you in this room are probably already spiritual activists, whether you know it or not. Now that we have these great new thought tools to guide us to a more conscious, intentional, and fulfilling life, if we choose, we can take this power out into the world for good. And, that's really what it's all about. And that is spiritual activism. So I want to emphasize that before we can really use our spiritual tools for activism, we must truly digest our connection to nature, our oneness with everything and everyone, and that understanding is really the foundation for spiritual activism. And there's so many wonderful examples of spiritual activism and leaders, and I've just picked a few, just 3, that are environmentally oriented. My favorite is Joanna Macy, for those of you who've heard of her. She's a Buddhist scholar and teacher, and probably, for me, the leading eco-activist, spiritual activist in the country. She created the phrase and subsequently named movement called the Great Turning. It's a wonderful book, too, by the way. And the Great Turning, I'm quoting, is a name for the essential adventure of our time, the shift from the industrial growth society to a life-sustaining civilization. And she cites 3 dimensions to the Great Turning, and one of those is a shift in consciousness. So you can do a lot of political work and activist work, but underneath that, the shift in consciousness must be there, or it's not lasting. That's what it is. It's not truly lasting. Then there are other groups. Here's one called the Gaia Field Project, which was an expression coined by Peter Russell in his 1983 book, The Global Brain. Their mission is something called subtle activism, which involves harnessing the power of consciousness-based practices like meditation and prayer to support collective transformation. So one example, they put together a wise climate program to connect spiritual practitioners and communities online to the activists working on climate change. So it was like a big pray-in for the activists before they went to the climate summit a few years ago, and to support them. It's interesting, isn't it? The idea that you would pray your consciousness into the healing of the earth. And here's one last one. This is a group organized around collective visioning. It's called the Vision Alignment Project. And so this is online now. You don't have to go to a room or a meeting house. You just go online and you join in this collective vision. And here's their vision for Mother Earth, part of it. Mother Earth herself is tended to like a garden, where her beauty is celebrated always, where her beaches, her deserts, her pastures and prairies, her meadows and mountaintops are sacred to all who walk there, and where her highest good is considered and honored. So here are thousands of people online holding this vision. And you know that works. You know that stuff works. So there is this element of personalizing nature. And enough of us hold a vision. I mean, we can't fix everything, but it can make a big difference. And it's the underpinning for activism in the outside world. So the takeaways today, my favorite minister once told me you always have to have takeaways. You have to give people some things to walk away with. So I try to do that. And the 3 today are reconnect to nature and the sense of oneness with everything. 2, take actions that feed your shifting consciousness. And 3, expand that consciousness out to practice spiritual activism. And there's so many opportunities to experience spiritual activism, and no more so than within a great community like this. Something for everyone. The point is to get started. And it's not just because you may have great outcomes, it's because of what it does for you and your own well-being. I can tell you, speaking from my personal experience, that becoming a spiritual activist has helped me counteract the sadness I feel when we have the loss of a beautiful place or living creatures that we've displaced forever. It helps me overcome feelings of separation and cynicism. And I have something to work towards every day in small actions. And those actions have meaning for me and feed my soul. So I'm going to close with a reading from Rachel Carson, and then we're going to do a very brief meditation, and I want to take you to your original source of connection with nature. So this, for those of you who don't know, Rachel Carson wrote a book in '62 called Silent Spring, and her work led to the grassroots movement that became the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. So she's, in a way, the grandmother of the environmental movement. This is from an essay of hers. The book is called, the essay is called The Sense of Wonder. One stormy autumn night, when my nephew Roger was about 20 months old, I wrapped him in a blanket and carried him down to the beach in the rainy darkness. Out there, just at the edge of where we couldn't see, big waves were thundering in, dimly seen white shapes that boomed and shouted and threw great handfuls of froth at us. Together we laughed for pure joy, he, a baby, meeting for the first time the wild tumult of Oceanus, I with the salt of half a lifetime of sea love in me. But I think we felt the same spine-tingling response to the vast, roaring ocean and the wild night around us. Well, it was hardly a conventional way to entertain one so young, I suppose, but now with Roger, a little past his 4th birthday, we are continuing that sharing of adventures in the world of nature that we began in his babyhood, and I think the results are good. A child's world is fresh and new and beautiful, full of wonder and excitement. It is our misfortune that for most of us, that clear-eyed vision, that true instinct for what is beautiful and awe-inspiring, is dimmed and even lost before we reach adulthood. If I could influence one thing, and that would be that the good fairy would give each child in the world a sense of wonder so indestructible that it would last throughout life, as an unfailing antidote against the boredom and disenchantments of later years, the sterile preoccupation with things that are artificial, the alienation from the sources of our strength. So what is the value of preserving and strengthening this sense of awe and wonder, this recognition of something beyond the boundaries of human existence? Is the exploration of the natural world just a pleasant way to pass the golden hours of childhood, or is there something deeper? I am sure there is something much deeper, something lasting and significant. Those who dwell as scientists or laymen among the beauties and mysteries of the earth, are never alone or weary of life. Whatever the vexations or concerns of their personal lives, their thoughts can find paths that lead to inner contentment and to renewed excitement in living. Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. There is symbolic as well as actual beauty in the migration of the birds, the ebb and flow of the tides, the folded bud ready for the spring. There is something infinitely healing in the repeated refrains of nature, the assurance that dawn comes after night and spring after the winter. All right, let's go into this quiet little place. I want you to breathe in and place yourself in the most comfortable, beautiful place you can imagine, in nature. Perhaps it's that original place you went where you had your aha. Or maybe it's just in your backyard. Could be by the ocean, on the top of the mountain. Perhaps you're the soaring eagle, watching a child run through a meadow, watching the birds at your bird feeder. And I want you to taste the air, feel the sun on your face, see all the vivid colors. Make this real. Make this the most exquisite sanctuary in nature you can possibly imagine. All right, now that you've created this magnificent space where you are safe and loved and so comfortable, I want you to look out around you and draw in those images of things or people or places that speak to your soul. Perhaps it's your favorite tree on the top of a mountain. Perhaps it's a beloved grandmother who first showed you how to plant seeds. Maybe it's your favorite pet. It can be a whole landscape. It can be someone you've never seen before. Your favorite God image, a child. Draw all these beautiful beings in around your circle of comfort and peace. Feel them. Feel them sending energy in towards you. Because this is your connection to the oneness, to the whole web of life. And no matter what the future brings, this lies within you always, can never be taken from you, never disturbed. No storm, no wind, no human act can disrupt this perfect place within you. Your connection to God as nature. Your place of complete harmony and balance. And now send gratitude to these magnificent images that have come to you, your circle of connection, your nature council, knowing that you always have access to this and that all of this wonderful energy can be sent out into the world for good. We all have that capacity. We all give it and we can receive it. And Thank you, God, for all the magnificence you've created through nature, including us. And we know that we will recognize our connection today and forevermore. Thank you, God. And so it is.